It was an ordinary day in the world of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and John Cena, the two WWE superstars who were known for their larger-than-life personas, both in the ring and outside of it. They were each in the middle of their own busy schedules. The Rock was on set filming his latest movie, and Cena was preparing for an upcoming match. Yet something was about to happen that would stop them in their tracks, something that would change the course of their day and leave them rethinking their roles as public figures. On that same day, a young girl not much older than a teenager sat alone in her room. Her heart raced as she stared at the screen in front of her, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed out a message. She had never been one to ask for help. She had always been independent, relying on herself to get through tough times. But now the situation had become too much to handle alone. The weight of the world seemed to press down on her, and all she wanted was someone, anyone, to hear her. She had admired these two men for as long as she could remember. Their strength, resilience, and kindness had always inspired her. But today it wasn't just admiration that drove her to reach out. It was desperation. She had been battling with her circumstances for so long, feeling isolated, misunderstood, and unsupported. She didn't know where else to turn. So in a moment of vulnerability, she sent out an SOS. It wasn't just a random message, it was a call for help. She typed the names of The Rock and Cena, knowing that if anyone could make a difference, it would be them. They had power, they had influence, and, perhaps more importantly, they had the heart to help someone in need. The message was simple, but it carried the weight of her entire situation. It was a cry for help that she didn't know how else to express. She hit send and waited, her heart in her throat. She didn't know what would happen next, but a small part of her hoped that they would see it, that they would understand the gravity of what she was feeling. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, The Rock was sitting in his trailer on set reviewing his lines. His phone buzzed, distracting him from the script in front of him. At first, he didn't think much of it. He was used to notifications from fans and followers. But when he glanced at the message, something about it caught his attention. It wasn't just any regular message. It was an SOS. He clicked on it, reading the words carefully, his brow furrowed as he realized the seriousness of what he was reading. He didn't know what exactly was happening, but it was clear that the young girl needed help. Without hesitation, The Rock typed a quick reply asking for more details and offering support in any way he could. His mind raced as he considered what to do next. He couldn't ignore it. This wasn't just a fan message. This was a cry for help from someone who needed him. Across town, John Cena was also finishing up his preparations for the day when he received the same message. He opened his phone, reading the same words The Rock had just seen. His reaction was instant. His heart sank as he realized the situation was dire. This wasn't something he could brush off. This was someone in need, and he had the resources and platform to help. John Cena's response was similar to The Rock's. He immediately reached out, offering his support and assuring the girl that she wasn't alone. But even as he typed his reply, he knew this was just the beginning. The message was clear. They needed to take action. They couldn't just offer empty words of encouragement. They had to find out what was really going on and how they could make a difference. The Rock and Cena quickly found themselves in constant communication, discussing the situation and trying to figure out the best course of action. They both knew that they had to act quickly. Time was critical, and the longer they waited, the harder it would be to help. But there was one problem. Neither of them had any idea where the girl was. Her message didn't include a location, just the desperate plea for help. The only thing they knew for sure was that she needed them, and they couldn't turn their backs on her. Both men immediately began reaching out to their teams, hoping that they could track down more information about the girl. They knew they couldn't do this alone. It wasn't long before their teams began working with authorities and social workers, trying to locate the girl and figure out exactly what she was going through. The Rock and Cena shared their concerns with their fans, asking for help in any way they could. Social media, usually a source of joy and entertainment, now became a vital tool in their search for the girl. They posted the SOS message, hoping that it would reach someone who could help guide them to her. The support they received from their followers was overwhelming. People from all walks of life offered advice, information, and encouragement. Some shared their own experiences, telling stories of times they had felt lost and how reaching out for help had saved them. Others offered practical help, providing contact information for organizations that could assist in locating the girl. Despite the outpouring of support, the situation was more complicated than either The Rock or Cena had anticipated. The girl's location remained a mystery, and every lead they followed seemed to turn into a dead end. The two superstars found themselves growing increasingly frustrated as the hours passed. They wanted to help, but they didn't know how, but they couldn't give up. They knew they had to keep going, no matter how difficult the search became. The girl had reached out to them for a reason, and they weren't about to let her down. As the day turned to night, the sense of urgency continued to build. Both The Rock and Cena were exhausted, but they refused to stop. They stayed up late working with their teams, reaching out to anyone who might have information, and posting updates on social media. Every time they saw a new message of support or encouragement from their fans, they felt a renewed sense of determination. The Rock had always been known for his strength and resilience, but tonight he felt a different kind of strength. It wasn't physical strength, it was the strength of purpose. He wasn't just an actor or a wrestler tonight. He was someone who had the power to make a difference in someone's life. And he wasn't going to waste that opportunity. For Cena, it was the same. He had spent his career inspiring others, but now, he found himself in the position of being the one who needed to inspire. He knew that this was more than just a moment of fame or a chance to be a hero. This was about doing what was right, and so they pressed on, both men determined to find the girl and offer the help she so desperately needed. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they also knew that they couldn't stop now. The Rock and Cena were ready to do whatever it took to bring this story to a positive conclusion, even if they had no idea what the next step would be. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of an incredible journey, a journey that would test their resolve and prove the true power of human connection. The hours after the initial message were long and filled with uncertainty. The Rock and John Cena had just taken their first steps into an unknown and urgent situation. They both knew the gravity of the girl's SOS message, and they couldn't shake the weight of it. With every passing minute, their sense of responsibility grew heavier. They couldn't afford to stop now, not when someone was depending on them. As the search continued, their team scrambled to find any information that could lead them to the girl. There was a sense of urgency in the air. Every lead, no matter how small, was carefully followed. The Rock's team worked closely with the local authorities, while Cena's team connected with social workers and people from various organizations who specialized in tracking down people in distress. They were working together, but it felt like they were still chasing shadows. The lack of concrete details about the girl's whereabouts made the situation more difficult. Her message hadn't included any information about where she was or why she was in trouble. All they had was the message itself, desperate, short, and to the point. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show that something was seriously wrong. The Rock and Cena knew they couldn't let this go, but each new hour that passed made it harder to hold on to hope. Both men spent the rest of the evening in meetings with their teams, discussing possible ways to locate the girl. The more they learned about her message, the more they realized that it wasn't just a simple cry for attention. This was someone in real danger. Her words had been carefully chosen, and her plea for help carried a sense of fear and urgency that neither man could ignore. The Rock had always been someone who could handle almost any challenge that came his way. Whether it was in the wrestling ring or in Hollywood, he was known for his resilience and strength. But this situation was different. This wasn't a scripted match or a planned film scene. This was real life, and the stakes couldn't be higher. John Cena, too, was used to dealing with high-pressure situations, but even he couldn't deny the deep sense of worry that had settled into his chest. As a professional wrestler and an actor, he had seen his fair share of intense moments, but this was a whole new kind of stress. This wasn't about a storyline or a performance. It was about a person who was in trouble, and he was determined to do whatever it took to help. The feeling of helplessness began to creep in as they tried to piece together the details of the girl's situation. They had no way of knowing where she was, who she was with, or what had led her to send the SOS in the first place. They both felt like they were running out of options, but neither one of them was willing to give up. They couldn't afford to. The girl's message had been shared across social media, and soon more people began reaching out. Fans of The Rock and Cena flooded their feeds with messages of support, encouragement, and suggestions. Some shared information about places where they thought the girl might be. while others offered their own stories of times they had felt lost or alone. It was clear that many people cared, and the collective energy of the fans seemed to fuel the efforts of the two superstars. But despite the outpouring of support, the search was still far from over. The Rock found himself reflecting on his own life as the hours dragged on. He had been through so much over the years, both personal and professional battles that had shaped him into the person he was today. But this was different. This wasn't about him or his success. This was about someone who was struggling, and it struck him in a way he hadn't anticipated. He thought about how as a kid he had always admired those who helped others, those who used their platform for good. Now, he realized, it was his turn to step up and do whatever he could to make a difference. Cena, too, began to think about his own journey. As someone who had built a career on inspiring others, he knew what it felt like to be a beacon of hope for someone in need. But this was the first time he had ever been in a situation like this. He was used to being the one to inspire others, but now, he was the one who needed to be inspired. And in that moment, he realized how much of an impact they could have on someone's life. The girl had reached out to them for help, and it was up to them to deliver. Both men were relentless in their pursuit of the truth. They spent the night trying to follow every lead, checking in with their teams and coordinating with authorities. The hours felt long and exhausting, but neither The Rock nor Cena slowed down. The fear of not finding the girl kept them going, pushing them through their fatigue. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, there was a breakthrough. A local contact from Cena's team had been able to track down a few more details based on the small clues left in the girl's message. It wasn't a clear location, but it was a start. The Rock and Cena both jumped on a video call discussing their next steps. They were exhausted, but the hope that they were finally getting closer to finding her filled them with a new sense of energy. It was clear that they weren't going to be able to solve everything right away, but they had made progress. And for the first time since they had received the SOS message, they felt like they were on the right path. The girl, who had been alone and scared, now had a team of people working tirelessly to bring her to safety. The sense of responsibility had weighed heavily on both of them, but they knew they couldn't stop. The Rock and Cena had always been known for their tenacity, both in the ring and in life. They had faced challenges before, but this felt different. This wasn't about fame or money. This was about doing what was right. As the night turned into morning, the search became more focused. The teams had narrowed down the possible locations where the girl might be, and both The Rock and Cena felt a renewed sense of urgency. They had come this far, and they weren't about to stop now. It wasn't just about finding her anymore. It was about making sure she was safe. Both men knew that the next steps would be crucial. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. With the help of their teams, law enforcement, and their fans, they were finally closing in on a lead that could bring them one step closer to the girl. The hours of searching, the uncertainty and the fear of not being able to help had tested their resolve, but now they were more determined than ever. They had the tools, the resources, and the drive to see this through. The Rock and Cena weren't going to stop until the girl was safe, no matter what it took. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose, they pressed on. The journey wasn't over yet, but they were no longer alone. The girl had reached out for help, and now there was a whole community, led by two of the biggest names in the world, coming together to make sure she wouldn't be left behind. The search for the girl had now entered a new phase. The Rock and Cena, along with their teams, were no longer just trying to figure out where she was. They were now focused on understanding her story, her struggles, her background, and what had led her to send that SOS message. Every new detail that came in only deepened their concern for her, but it also fueled their determination to keep going. As the days went by, The Rock and Cena worked tirelessly, each of them diving deeper into the situation. They both knew they had to move beyond just trying to locate her. They needed to understand why she had reached out to them. The girl had trusted them, and they couldn't let her down. Their teams had begun to gather bits and pieces of information that slowly started to paint a clearer picture. The girl's message hadn't just been a random call for help. It had been a cry from someone who had been through so much already. Someone who felt that they had no other choice but to turn to two strangers for help. Through a few social media messages and private contacts, they learned more about the girl's situation. She had been going through a tough time for a while, struggling with family issues, facing isolation at school, and feeling like no one truly understood her. Life had become overwhelming for her, and the girl had started to feel invisible, as though no one cared about her pain. That's when she had reached out. What struck both The Rock and Cena the most was the emotional toll it had taken on her. She wasn't just in a dangerous situation, she was emotionally drained. The weight of her feelings had led her to that moment of vulnerability, where she felt like no one could help her. But in a strange twist of fate, she had chosen them, two people she had never met but who, in some way, had been a source of strength for her from afar. The more The Rock and Cena learned, the more they felt a deep sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about finding her. It was about understanding her pain and being there for her in a way that went beyond just solving the immediate crisis. The girl needed more than just someone to save her. She needed someone who could help her heal. Both men were no strangers to adversity, but hearing about the girl's struggles made them realize just how much they took their own privilege for granted. They had both faced challenges in their lives, but nothing compared to what she had been going through. And now they were in a position where they could do something to change her life for the better. It was a feeling neither of them had expected, but one that changed them both. The Rock spent time thinking about his own experiences, about growing up with challenges and fighting to get to where he was today. He thought about the people who had helped him along the way, mentors, friends, and even strangers who had offered a hand when he needed it most. He had never forgotten those moments. Now he realized he had a chance to be that person for someone else. It wasn't just about being a celebrity. It was about being human, about offering real help in someone's time of need. Cena, too, reflected on his own journey. He had built a career on inspiring others, on being the person people looked to for strength and motivation. But now, he understood what it really meant to be that source of hope. It wasn't about giving a motivational speech or a catchphrase. It was about showing up when it mattered most, being there for someone when they felt like they had nowhere else to turn. It was about doing more than just saying the right words. It was about actions that truly made a difference. With this newfound understanding, The Rock and Cena's sense of purpose became even stronger. They weren't just trying to locate the girl anymore. They were working to find a way to offer her a path to healing, to help her rebuild her confidence and sense of worth. The girl had reached out to them for a reason, and they couldn't let that moment slip away. Their teams continued to search for her, and after a few more days of digging, they were able to narrow down the possible location where she had been last seen. It wasn't the breakthrough they had hoped for, but it was progress. They had a lead, and they were now more determined than ever to act on it. The Rock and Cena knew that they couldn't do this alone. They had the resources, yes, but this was not a job for celebrities or social media influencers. This was a job for professionals, people who specialized in helping those who had gone through traumatic experiences. They reached out to local mental health professionals, social workers, and organizations dedicated to helping young people in crisis. The two superstars made it clear to everyone involved that they wanted to do whatever it took to ensure the girl's safety, not just physically but emotionally as well. In the meantime, The Rock and Cena also took time to reflect on the wider issue of mental health, especially among young people. They knew that this wasn't just a one-time incident. The girl's SOS was a symptom of a larger problem. Many young people, especially those who felt isolated or misunderstood, didn't know where to turn when things got tough. There were so many like her, facing battles they couldn't fight alone. It became clear that the work they were doing now could extend far beyond this one case. They wanted to be a part of a larger movement to raise awareness and offer help to young people who were struggling. As the days passed, the sense of hope began to grow. The girl's location had been confirmed, and with the help of their teams, The Rock and Cena were able to make contact with local authorities to ensure that she would be safely taken into care. The news that she was being helped came with a huge sigh of relief, but it was far from over. Both men knew that the journey was just beginning for the girl. Her path to healing would take time, and they wanted to be a part of it. The Rock reached out to the girl personally, sending her a message of support. He let her know that he was thinking of her, that she was not alone, and that he would be there if she ever needed to talk. Cena did the same, offering his words of encouragement and letting her know that she had the strength to get through whatever was ahead. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to the girl. Her SOS had been heard, and even though she hadn't known it at the time, she had reached out to two of the most caring and determined people in the world. Both men had shown up for her in a way that went far beyond their public personas. They had shown up as human beings who cared, and that was something the girl would never forget. As the news spread, the outpouring of support continued to grow. The Rock and Cena's fans, along with people from all walks of life, joined in to offer their support for the girl. It was a reminder that in times of crisis, the world could come together to make a difference. And for the Rock and Cena, this experience had reaffirmed their belief in the power of kindness, empathy, and the importance of being there for one another. The girl's journey to healing had only just begun, but she was no longer alone. She had a community of people, some she knew and many she didn't, who were rooting for her, supporting her every step of the way. And for the Rock and Cena, that was the most important thing they could offer. The news that the girl was safe was a huge relief to both the Rock and Cena, but it was only the first step in what would be a long and challenging journey for her. Both men knew that finding her was just the beginning. The girl had faced more than just physical danger. She had been emotionally scarred, isolated, and struggling with her sense of worth. They were determined to not only make sure she was physically safe, but to support her through the emotional and psychological hurdles she would face in the days to come. After the authorities had ensured her immediate safety, the Rock and Cena knew that it was time for the real work to begin. Their teams coordinated with social workers, counselors, and mental health professionals to create a safe space for the girl, a place where she could begin to heal without fear of judgment or pressure. Both the Rock and Cena had made it clear that they wanted to be there for her, but they also understood that professional help was crucial in this situation. The girl, whose name they still didn't know at the time, was slowly starting to process what had happened. She had been through a whirlwind of emotions over the past few days, fear, confusion, and relief. But now, she was faced with the reality of what she had gone through. It was overwhelming, and though she was grateful for the help she had received, she wasn't sure what the next steps would look like. For the Rock and Cena, it was about showing up, not just as celebrities, but as people who genuinely cared. They continued to send messages of encouragement, letting her know that they were there for her every step of the way. They knew that they couldn't take away her pain, but they hoped that their support would help her find the strength to rebuild her life. The girl's first few days in care were difficult. She struggled with trusting others, especially those who didn't fully understand what she had been through. She had been let down by so many people in her life, and the idea of opening up to strangers felt like a huge barrier. But little by little, with the help of her counselors and support team, she began to realize that not everyone was the same. The people around her now weren't there to judge her. They were there to help her heal. The Rock and Cena, too, were learning through this experience. As much as they wanted to fix everything, they knew they had to take a step back and let the professionals handle the delicate work of guiding her through her recovery. It wasn't easy for them to accept, but they understood that their role wasn't to swoop in and save the day. Instead, it was to offer support, give her space to heal, and remind her that she wasn't alone. As the girl began to settle into her new routine, she started to realize that her life wasn't over. It was hard to imagine a future where she felt safe and confident again, but with each passing day, she began to see small glimpses of hope. She attended therapy sessions, talked to her counselors, and slowly started to understand that the feelings she had been carrying were not a reflection of her worth. They were the result of circumstances beyond her control, and it wasn't her fault. One day, after a particularly tough therapy session, the Rock and Cena sent her messages of encouragement. They told her they were proud of the progress she was making, even though they knew it didn't always feel like progress. Healing wasn't linear, and it took time. They let her know that they believed in her, and that they would always be there to support her. It wasn't just about being famous figures. It was about being human beings who understood that everyone goes through struggles, and everyone deserves a chance to overcome them. The girl, who had been so unsure about her future, began to feel a spark of hope. She hadn't expected this kind of support from people she had never met before. She had expected pity or superficial kindness, but instead, the Rock and Cena offered her something deeper, real, unwavering support. And it made all the difference. Meanwhile, the Rock and Cena were both busy with their professional lives, but they made it a point to check in regularly. They knew the importance of keeping the connection alive, even if it was just through a simple message or an occasional call. They didn't want her to feel abandoned or forgotten. They wanted her to know that no matter what, they were in this together. The girl's progress wasn't without setbacks. There were days when she felt overwhelmed, days when the memories of her struggles came rushing back, and days when she questioned whether she would ever truly heal. But with each day that passed, she began to learn how to manage her emotions and how to find strength in places she hadn't known existed. As she went through this process, she began to connect with others in the community who had gone through similar experiences. She found comfort in knowing that she wasn't the only one who had faced hardships, and that there were people out there who understood her pain. She wasn't alone anymore, and that realization made a world of difference. The Rock and Cena, too, were moved by the progress she was making. They had always believed in the power of resilience, but seeing it firsthand in this young girl was something they would never forget. It was a reminder that no matter how tough life gets, there is always hope for a better tomorrow. As the months went by, the girl continued to make strides in her recovery. She learned to set boundaries, to speak up for herself, and to ask for help when she needed it. She found her voice again, and with it a renewed sense of purpose. The weight of the world no longer felt as heavy, and though she still faced challenges, she knew she was stronger than she had ever realized. The Rock and Cena remained a part of her journey, but they weren't the only ones who had helped her find her way. It was the combination of the support from professionals, the encouragement from her newfound community, and the belief in herself that allowed her to heal. The girl had done the hard work. She had taken the first steps toward recovery, and she had learned that she was worthy of love, support, and a brighter future. It was a journey that would continue for some time, but the girl no longer felt like a victim of her circumstances. She had found strength in her vulnerability, and in that strength she had rediscovered who she was. The Rock and Cena's support had given her the foundation she needed, but it was her own determination that would carry her forward. Both men felt an immense sense of pride as they watched the girl grow stronger each day. They knew that they had played a small part in her journey, but it was clear to them that the real hero in this story was the girl herself. She had been through more than anyone should ever have to endure, but she had emerged on the other side with a sense of hope, strength, and resilience that was truly inspiring. And so, as time went on, the Rock and Cena continued to offer their support. But they knew that the girl was no longer just a victim of her circumstances. She was a survivor, and with every step she took toward healing, she was proving that no matter how dark the road may seem, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. The day the girl took her first steps outside after weeks of intense therapy and support felt like a milestone, not just for her, but for everyone who had been part of her journey. It had been a long and difficult road, but now she was ready to face the world again. This time, she wasn't the same person who had sent out that desperate SOS message. She had changed. She had learned, grown, and found strength in places she never thought possible. But she knew that her healing wasn't over. It was an ongoing process, one that she would need to continue working on for a long time. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of control over her own life. The Rock and Cena, though they had given her space to heal, were always just a message away. They had continued to send words of encouragement, checking in on her progress, reminding her that they were proud of how far she had come. Their role in her journey wasn't over yet. They didn't just want to be distant figures who had helped once. They wanted to remain a steady source of support, someone she could rely on even after all the chaos had settled down. It wasn't just about being famous anymore. It wasn't about being seen by millions. It was about helping one person who needed it. It was about showing up when someone needed to know that they weren't alone in the world. And for both The Rock and Cena, that had become something far more meaningful than any of their public achievements. The girl was beginning to rediscover who she was, but there were days when the weight of her past still felt heavy. The memories of everything she had been through never fully disappeared, but she was learning how to manage them. Therapy had taught her new ways to cope, to take things one day at a time and to acknowledge her emotions without letting them control her. The support system around her had been essential in her recovery. Her counselors, social workers, and newfound friends were all there to help her rebuild her life. But there were moments when she thought back to that night when she had reached out to The Rock and Cena. At the time, she had felt as though no one cared, as though no one would ever hear her. She had been wrong. Their messages, their encouragement, their constant support, it had all meant the world to her. It had been a lifeline, Even though they were famous, even though they had lives that were far removed from hers, they had never treated her like she was just another fan. They had treated her like a person, someone worthy of care and respect. They had shown her that there were good people in the world who genuinely cared. As the months passed, the girl began to open up more to the people around her. She made new friends and started to reconnect with old ones. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when she felt overwhelmed, but little by little she was learning to trust again. The world hadn't turned its back on her. She hadn't turned her back on herself, and she was starting to see that she had the strength to rebuild her life, one step at a time. The Rock and Cena, from time to time, would send little messages of encouragement, checking in and asking how things were going. The girl knew that they were always there for her, but she had begun to rely less on them for validation and more on her own sense of worth. She didn't need constant reminders from them that she was doing well. She could see it in herself now. She could feel it. One day, after a particularly tough week, the girl decided to do something she had been wanting to do for a long time. She reached out to the Rock and Cena. She wanted them to know how much they had meant to her, how much their support had truly made a difference in her life. She wasn't just sending a message of gratitude. She was sending a message of growth. She wasn't the scared, hopeless girl who had sent out that SOS anymore. She was someone who had taken control of her own narrative. Her message was simple, but it was full of meaning. She thanked them for believing in her when she hadn't believed in herself. She told them that their support had been the foundation she needed to rebuild her life. She shared that thanks to their encouragement and the help of the professionals around her, she was starting to see a future, one where she could thrive, not just survive. When the Rock and Cena read her message, they were both overwhelmed with emotion. They had known that helping her wasn't about getting credit. It wasn't about seeking validation for their actions. It was about showing up, being there for someone who needed it, and offering a hand when things felt impossible. But seeing her message, knowing that their support had made a difference, that was the reward. It wasn't about being thanked. It was about knowing that, in some small way, they had played a part in helping someone reclaim their life. In the weeks that followed, the Rock and Cena continued their own work, but they always kept the girl in their hearts. They knew that her journey wasn't over, but they were confident that she was on the right path. They had done what they could to help her find her footing, but the real credit belonged to her. She had done the hard work. She had faced her fears, acknowledged her pain, and found a way forward. And that was something to be incredibly proud of. As for the girl, she knew that her story wasn't one of perfection. She still had moments of doubt, moments when the past would resurface, but she was learning to navigate those moments with grace. She was learning to be kind to herself, to accept that healing wasn't a linear process. There would be setbacks, but there would also be breakthroughs. And with every breakthrough, she grew stronger. Looking back at her journey, the girl realized that reaching out to the Rock and Cena hadn't been a random decision. It had been the turning point in her life, the moment when she found the courage to ask for help. That SOS had been her way of saying, "I'm not okay, but I need someone to help me through this." And they had answered that call in the most meaningful way. Her future was no longer defined by fear or uncertainty. It was defined by possibility. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but she also knew she had the tools and the strength to face them. She wasn't alone. She had a community, a team of people who believed in her, and above all, she had herself. The girl's story was a testament to the power of support, the importance of showing up for others, and the strength that comes from within when you allow yourself to heal. It was a reminder that no matter how dark the road may seem, there is always a way forward, and sometimes the most unexpected sources of support can help light the way. For the Rock and Cena, their involvement in her journey had shown them the importance of empathy, kindness, and the impact they could have on a person's life simply by being present. It had been a humbling experience for both of them, and it reminded them why they had chosen to be public figures in the first place, not for fame, but for the chance to make a positive difference. And so as time passed, the girl continued to grow, finding new ways to navigate her life and its challenges. And the Rock and Cena, though they may not have been part of the spotlight in her life anymore, would always hold a special place in her heart. They had been there when she needed them most, and their kindness had helped her find a path forward.